Bianca sat in Camari's chair and calmly reached for the dinner plate that had been placed in front of it. Theophilus stopped breathing for a second. Nobody at the table said a word. His mother looked down. His brother shifted in his seat, and Grandma, who had been smiling just moments earlier, slowly put down her fork. "Get up." Bianca looked at her confused. Theophilus finally whispered, "Bianca, please." That was when Camari appeared at the entrance, still holding the birthday gift she had brought for Grandma. She looked at Bianca, then at her husband, then at the chair. But what hurt Camari most wasn't that another woman was sitting in her place. It was the look on Theophilus's face. He wasn't surprised to see Bianca. He was terrified that Camari had finally found out why she was there, and Grandma already knew everything. Welcome to Mr. Graham's story, where every story leaves a lesson. Whether you're new here or part of our growing family, thank you for being here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and as the story unfolds, tell me what you would have done in the same situation. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps us bring more meaningful stories to people around the world. Now, let's begin today's story. 8 months before that birthday dinner, Camari was standing in their kitchen reminding Theophilus that his mother's birthday was on Saturday. "I know," he said, looking at his phone. "You said that last year, too." He looked up and smiled. "And I survived. You survived because I reminded you. That sounds like teamwork to me." Camari shook her head, but she was smiling. That was how most things went between them. They had been married nearly 8 years, long enough to know each other's habits without needing to discuss them. Theophilus knew Camari hated being rushed in the morning. Camari knew he would leave a glass on the counter even if the dishwasher was 3 feet away. He knew which restaurants she liked. She knew which family members he would forget to call unless somebody reminded him. Their home in Atlanta was comfortable, and so was the life they had built inside it. Theophilus had done well in commercial real estate. Camari had her own career, but at home she was usually the one keeping track of the details that made everything work. Birthdays, dinner reservations, family visits, the occasional forgotten bill, a text to check on somebody who had been unusually quiet. She did those things without keeping score. At least she tried not to. One Saturday afternoon, Theophilus came home carrying 2 grocery bags and found Camari at the dining table sorting through invitations. "You know you don't have to do all that," he said. She glanced up. "Do what?" "Keep everybody's life organized. They'd notice if I stopped. I'd notice." She looked at him for a moment. "That counts for something," she said. "It counts for a lot." He kissed the top of her head and carried the groceries into the kitchen. Camari watched him go. There were still moments like that, small ones, nothing anybody would photograph, nothing that would make a good anniversary post. But they mattered to her. Their marriage wasn't perfect. Camari could be stubborn, especially when she felt disrespected. When something hurt her, she sometimes became quiet instead of starting an argument. And because she believed marriage meant standing beside someone through difficult seasons, she had a habit of giving people another chance after they probably didn't deserve one. Theophilus knew that. He knew exactly how much she trusted him. That trust had become so ordinary to him that he stopped noticing it. Grandma noticed everything. Theophilus's grandmother had always been close to Camari. She had welcomed her into the family years earlier, and over time, Camari stopped feeling like a granddaughter-in-law whenever she was around Grandma. She simply felt like family. One Sunday after church, Grandma sat at Camari's kitchen counter drinking coffee while Theophilus searched through a drawer for something he had misplaced. "You keep looking in the same place," Grandma said. "I know it's in here. You said that 5 minutes ago." Camari laughed. Theophilus looked over his shoulder. "Nobody's on my side today." Grandma smiled. "You don't need everybody on your side. You need to find what you're looking for." He finally found the keys. "See?" Grandma watched him walk away. Then she looked at Camari. "He's doing well?" Camari nodded. "Yeah, why?" "Nothing." Camari studied her. Grandma took another sip of coffee. "I asked a question, and I answered it." "You did." Camari smiled faintly. At the time, she thought Grandma was simply being Grandma. She didn't know that the older woman had already started noticing small changes in Theophilus that Camille had not yet put together. For Camille, the marriage still felt familiar. There were disagreements, busy weeks, missed calls, family obligations, and nights when one of them fell asleep before the other. But there was also history, 8 years of it. And Camille believed history meant something. She believed that when two people had built a life together, ordinary seasons did not mean the love was gone. She believed familiarity was something to protect, not escape. Theophilus had once believed that too. Then somebody outside the marriage started making him feel like being known wasn't enough, and he began confusing that feeling with being understood. The first time Bianca made Theophilus laugh, he was standing beside a conference table trying to explain why a deal had suddenly become more complicated than anyone expected. Most people in the room were focused on the numbers. Bianca was focused on him. "You're doing that thing," she said afterward. Theophilus looked at her. "What thing?" "Acting like you're not irritated." He laughed. "I'm not irritated. You are. And you know this how? Because you stopped tapping your pen." He looked down. She was right. Theophilus smiled despite himself. It was a small moment, but he remembered it. Bianca worked around the same professional circles he did. She was confident without constantly demanding attention, and she had a way of noticing details that made conversations with her feel different. She knew he was married. That didn't seem to bother her. In fact, she occasionally mentioned Camille herself. "How's your wife?" she asked one afternoon. "She's good." "Still keeping you organized?" Theophilus smiled. "You have no idea." Bianca smiled back. "I can tell." He should have left the conversation there. Instead, he stayed. At first, it was harmless enough. A few messages about work, a joke, a conversation after a meeting, then a phone call that had nothing to do with business. Theophilus didn't tell himself he was cheating. Not yet. He told himself Bianca was simply easy to talk to. At home, Camille knew him too well. She knew when he was tired. She knew when he was stressed. She knew when he was pretending something didn't bother him. There was comfort in that. But there was also nowhere to hide. Bianca didn't know those parts of him. She saw the successful businessman, the confident man walking into meetings with answers, the man other people listened to, and she admired him. Theophilus liked that feeling more than he wanted to admit. One evening, Camille asked him about his day while they were eating dinner. "Long," he said. "Good long or bad long?" "Just long." She nodded and continued eating. A minute passed. Then she looked at him. "You're smiling." Theophilus glanced up. "Am I?" "Yeah. Can't I smile at dinner?" "You can." She smiled too. He looked away. His phone was face down beside his plate. Camille noticed. She didn't say anything. That was one of the things Theophilus had counted on without realizing it. Camille didn't interrogate people she loved. She gave them room. She assumed honesty would eventually fill that room. With Bianca, Theophilus didn't have to explain why he was disappointed with life. He could complain without being challenged. He could talk about feeling overlooked without admitting that Camille had spent years quietly supporting him. And Bianca listened. One evening she said something that stayed with him. "You spent so much time taking care of everybody else." Theophilus looked at her. "You ever think about what you want?" He almost laughed. "I have a wife. I didn't say you didn't." Theophilus stared at her. Bianca didn't look away. That should have been the moment he ended it. Instead, he stayed. A few weeks later, their conversations became harder to explain. They met outside work, then again and again. Each time, Theophilus returned home with a story that sounded reasonable enough. A late meeting, a client dinner, traffic, a business issue that needed attention. Camille believed him. That was the part he would later have the hardest time remembering. Not the lies, her face when she believed them. He began telling himself that his marriage had changed. He wasn't saying it had become terrible. That would have been too obviously false. Instead, he focused on what was missing: the excitement, the attention, the feeling of being admired. He compared 8 years of real life with the carefully selected version of himself that Bianca got to see. And every time he did, the comparison made the marriage look smaller. Theophilus didn't realize he was creating the problem he claimed was already there. He had a choice each time Bianca contacted him. He could have told her he was married and needed boundaries. He could have gone home. He could have told Camille he felt disconnected. Instead, he kept choosing the conversation that made him feel good. Eventually, Bianca stopped pretending they were only friends. "So what are we doing?" she asked one evening. Theophilus looked at her. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." He didn't answer. Bianca folded her arms. "You keep telling me things are complicated." "They are. Then simplify them." Theophilus looked down at the table. He knew exactly what she wanted him to say, and he said it. "I don't think my marriage is going to last." Bianca's expression softened. She believed him, and from that moment forward, Theophilus wasn't simply hiding an affair. He was building another future in his head while Camille was still living inside the first one. After Theophilus told Bianca that he didn't think his marriage would last, something changed between them. Bianca stopped asking whether there was a future. She started asking when. "When are you going to tell her?" she asked one evening. Theophilus stared at his phone. "Tell her what?" Bianca gave him a look. "You know what?" He sighed. "It isn't that simple. You always say that, because it isn't." Bianca leaned back in her chair. "You told me she already knows something is wrong. She knows we've been having problems." "That isn't what you said before." Theophilus looked at her. He knew he had been careless. He also knew he could fix it with another explanation. "Camille and I have been married a long time," he said. "There are family things, financial things, a lot of stuff." Bianca nodded slowly. "So you're leaving?" Theophilus hesitated. "I need time." Bianca didn't argue. She simply said, "Okay." That should have made him uncomfortable. Instead, it relieved him. He had managed to keep Bianca hopeful without actually making a decision. At home, Camille was beginning to notice the difference. Theophilus had always kept his phone nearby, but now he carried it from room to room. If a message came in while they were together, he would glance at the screen before turning it face down. One night, Camille reached for a glass of water from the kitchen. Theophilus's phone lit up on the counter. He moved faster than she expected. She stopped. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, you move pretty fast." He gave a small laugh. "Work." Camille nodded. She didn't ask to see the phone. Instead, she took her water and walked back to the bedroom. Theophilus watched her go. For several seconds, he stood there with the phone in his hand. Then a message appeared. "Are you really going to leave her?" He locked the screen. Upstairs, Camille was sitting on the edge of the bed. She heard him come in. "You coming to bed?" "In a minute." She waited. Then she turned off her lamp. It was a small thing. But over the next few weeks, there were more small things. He came home later. She stopped asking when he would be home. He became unusually affectionate on some nights, then distant on others. Camille didn't understand the pattern. She only knew something had changed. One morning she asked him directly, "Are we okay?" Theophilus was tying his shoes. He paused. "Of course we are." "You sure?" "Why wouldn't we be?" Camille looked at him. "I don't know." He stood up. "Cam, we're just busy." She nodded. "Okay." He kissed her cheek. She let him, but after he left, she remained standing in the kitchen for a moment, staring at the front door. She had asked a simple question, and somehow she had walked away feeling like she had asked for too much. That afternoon, Grandma called. "You coming Sunday?" Camille smiled. "Of course." "Good. I made too much food." "You always make too much food. Then come hungry." Camille laughed. For a few minutes, the conversation felt normal. Then Grandma asked, "How's Theophilus?" Camille paused. "He's good." Grandma didn't answer immediately. "You sure?" Camille looked out the window. "Why does everybody keep asking me that?" "Who else asked?" "Nobody." Grandma caught the hesitation, but she didn't push. "All right," she said. "I'll see you Sunday." When the call ended, Camille put her phone down. She didn't know that Grandma had already heard enough from other places to be concerned, and she certainly didn't know that Bianca had begun asking Theophilus questions about the family. Not about him, about them. "What does your grandmother like for her birthday?" Theophilus smiled. "Why? I just want to know. She likes family around." "Where does everybody sit?" He laughed. "Why are you asking me that?" Bianca shrugged. "I'm curious." He answered anyway. He told her about the birthday dinners, the family traditions, the house, the people who usually attended. The social connections Camry had developed over the years, things that meant very little to him in that moment, things that meant something entirely different to Bianca. She wasn't simply listening anymore. She was picturing herself there. Meanwhile, Grandma was watching Theophilus. She noticed how often he checked his phone, how quickly he changed the subject whenever Camry's name came up, how he smiled at messages he wouldn't explain. Grandma had lived long enough to know that people rarely change everything at once. They change one little thing, then another, and eventually somebody who knows them well realizes they're looking at a person who has started keeping secrets. She didn't confront him that Sunday, not yet. She wanted to know what kind of secret he was keeping, and before long, she would find out. Grandma did not confront Theophilus that Sunday. She watched him instead. It started with something small. After dinner, everyone was gathered around the living room talking when Theophilus's phone vibrated in his pocket. He checked it. Then he smiled, not the quick smile someone gives when they see a funny message, a private smile. Grandma noticed. "Who is that?" she asked. Theophilus looked up. "Nobody." Grandma raised an eyebrow. "Nobody has a name?" He laughed. "It's work." She nodded. "All right." But she didn't look convinced. Camry was sitting across the room talking with Theophilus's mother. She hadn't seen the exchange. Grandma watched her for a moment. Camry was laughing at something. She looked comfortable. She had no idea what was happening behind her husband's phone. Grandma looked back at Theophilus. He had already put the phone away. That was the first moment she became certain something was wrong. Not because of the message, because of how quickly he had decided she shouldn't know about it. A few days later, Grandma called Theophilus. "You busy? I'm at the office. I need to ask you something." "What? You happy?" There was a pause. Theophilus laughed awkwardly. "Where did that come from? Answer me." "Yeah, I'm good." "You didn't say happy." He leaned back in his chair. "Grandma, I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." He sighed. "I don't know what you want me to say. The truth would be nice." Theophilus went quiet. Grandma waited. Finally, he said, "Everything's complicated right now." Her expression changed. "What does that mean?" "It means work is stressful." "I didn't ask about work." Another silence. Then Theophilus said, "Camry and I are going through a lot." Grandma's voice stayed calm. "Does Camry know that?" "Yes." That answer came too quickly. Grandma heard it. "Does she?" Theophilus rubbed his forehead. "We've talked." "About what?" "Grandma." "What? You're making this bigger than it is." She sat back. "I haven't made anything bigger." He didn't answer. "I just asked you whether your wife knows her marriage is in trouble." Theophilus stared at the desk. "I need to go." "That's fine." He ended the call. Grandma sat quietly for several seconds. She had known Theophilus his whole life. She knew when he was angry, she knew when he was embarrassed, and she knew when he was trying to get away from a conversation. That evening, she called Camry. They talked about ordinary things first: work, family, the upcoming birthday dinner. Then Grandma asked casually, "You and Theophilus doing all right?" Camry paused. "We're fine." "You sure?" Camry gave a small laugh. "You've asked me that twice now. Maybe I like hearing your answer." Camry smiled, but there was less confidence in it this time. "He's been a little distracted." Grandma waited. "Anything else?" "I don't know." "Have you asked him?" "Yeah." "And?" "He says it's work." Grandma looked down at her hands. She could have told Camry then, she could have warned her, but she still didn't know everything. And Grandma had learned a long time ago that accusing someone without knowing the full truth could create another wound. So she asked instead, "You trust him?" Camry didn't hesitate. "Yes." That one word stayed with Grandma after the call ended, because she knew something Camry didn't. Theophilus had already started using that trust as cover. A few days later, Grandma finally learned Bianca's name. She didn't hear it from Theophilus. She heard it from someone who had seen the two of them together outside a professional event. The description matched too closely to dismiss. A woman, frequently around Theophilus, comfortable enough to behave as though she belonged beside him. Grandma didn't call her. She didn't call Camry. She called Theophilus. He answered after several rings. "Hey, Grandma, who is Bianca?" Silence, not long, just long enough. Grandma closed her eyes. That pause told me plenty, she said. Where did you hear that name? Doesn't matter. It does. No. What matters is whether you have something you need to tell me. Theophilus said nothing. Grandma's voice became quieter. Is there another woman? He finally answered. It's complicated. Grandma stared at the wall. No, baby, it isn't. She had been afraid of the answer, but hearing him avoid it made the truth clearer, and suddenly the affair itself was no longer the thing that bothered her most. She needed to know what he had promised Bianca, because if another woman had become comfortable enough to enter his family's world, then Theophilus had done more than hide a relationship. He had made someone believe she had a place waiting for her. Grandma wasn't ready to tell Camille yet, not until she knew exactly how far her grandson had gone. Camille stopped asking Theophilus what time he would be home. At first it was because she didn't want to sound like she was keeping track. Then she realized she was keeping track anyway. One Thursday evening she had dinner waiting at 7. By 8 she put his plate in the refrigerator. At 9 she heard his key in the front door. You eat? She asked from the kitchen. Yeah, Camille looked at him. You did? Client dinner? She nodded. She didn't ask which client. That was new. Theophilus noticed it too. You okay? I'm fine. He looked at her for a second. Then he walked upstairs. Camille remained in the kitchen. She opened the refrigerator, stared at his untouched plate, and closed it again. The next morning, Theophilus was unusually affectionate. He kissed her before leaving. Then he came back into the bedroom because he'd forgotten his wallet. He kissed her again. Camille smiled. What was that for? Can't I kiss my wife? You can. She watched him leave. The affection should have made her feel better. Instead, it confused her. That weekend they went to dinner with friends. Theophilus was relaxed, charming, and attentive. He reached across the table and touched Camille's hand while everyone was talking. She smiled. Nobody looking at them that night would have guessed anything was wrong. That was part of what made Camille feel so unsettled. The man everyone else saw was still there. She just couldn't seem to reach him when they were alone. On the drive home, she finally said, Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy with me? Theophilus glanced at her. What kind of question is that? A simple one. Of course I am. Camille looked out the window. You took a while. I was surprised. Why? Because nothing happened. She nodded. Okay. He reached for her hand. She let him hold it. Neither of them said anything else. Across town, Bianca was becoming less patient. She had believed Theophilus when he told her his marriage was nearly finished, but weeks were passing, then months, and Camille was still his wife. One evening, Bianca looked at him across a restaurant table. You keep saying soon, Theophilus sighed. I know. What does soon mean? I don't know. She stared at him. You said you were going to talk to her. I will. When? I don't know. Bianca leaned back. You always know when it's time to close a deal. Theophilus looked at her. This isn't a business deal. No, she said. It isn't. Theophilus didn't like the way she said it. He reached for his glass. Bianca watched him. I know about your family. He frowned. What do you mean? I mean I've heard you talk about them. So I know how close you all are. She paused. Your grandmother's birthday is coming up, right? Theophilus looked at her. Why do you know that? You told me. I don't remember telling you. You did. He stared at her. Bianca smiled slightly. I listen. That answer should have bothered him. Instead, he smiled. He told himself she was interested because she cared about him. He didn't understand that she was beginning to imagine where she would fit into his life. Meanwhile, Camille was noticing things that were harder to explain away. Theophilus had started changing passwords. He kept his phone beside him even when he showered. He became irritated when she asked innocent questions. One night, she picked up his jacket from the couch. A restaurant receipt fell from the pocket. She looked at it. It was from a place she had never heard him mention. The date was from the previous Thursday. Theophilus had told her he was at a client dinner. Camille held the receipt for several seconds. When he came downstairs, she was still standing there. What is that? He asked. She handed it to him. This fell out of your jacket. He looked at the receipt, then at her. It's a business dinner. With who? A client. Which client? He hesitated. That was all she needed to notice. She didn't accuse him. She simply said, "Okay." Then she walked away. Theophilus watched her. He could have told the truth. Instead, he put the receipt in his pocket. Kamari went upstairs without another word. For the first time, she wasn't trying to figure out whether something was wrong. She was beginning to wonder whether she could trust the answers she was getting, and that was a much harder problem to fix. The birthday dinner had always been one of Grandma's favorite traditions. Not because the food had to be perfect or because everybody could always make it. She liked having people around her, so when the family started discussing plans, Kamari immediately offered to help. "I'll handle the restaurant," she said. Grandma shook her head. "No, you won't." Kamari laughed. "Why not?" "Because it's my birthday. That doesn't mean you can't have help." Grandma pointed at her. "That's exactly what it means." Theophilus smiled from across the room. "You see why I married her?" Kamari looked at him. "Because I organize your life? That's part of it." Grandma laughed. For a moment everything felt normal, but Theophilus's phone vibrated. He glanced down. Bianca. He didn't open the message. He didn't need to. He already knew what she wanted. "Are you bringing me?" He locked the screen. Kamari noticed. She didn't say anything. Later that night, after they got home, Theophilus stood in the bedroom changing his shirt. Kamari was folding clothes. "Who was that?" He looked at her. "Who?" "The person who texted you. Work." She folded another shirt. "You've had a lot of work lately." He stopped. "What is that supposed to mean?" "Nothing." "Kamari." She looked at him. "I said nothing." He turned away. The conversation ended there. But the next morning Bianca asked the question again. "Are you bringing me to the birthday dinner?" Theophilus stared at her. "No." "Why?" "Because it's family." She smiled. "Your wife will be there." He didn't answer. "So that's the problem?" "Bianca, don't." "I thought you said your marriage was practically over." "It is complicated. You keep saying that." Theophilus rubbed his forehead. "Just give me time." Bianca looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Fine. But I'm tired of waiting for a life you keep telling me is already mine." Theophilus looked at her. "What does that mean?" "You know what it means." She walked away before he could answer. He stood there alone. For the first time, he realized Bianca was no longer willing to stay in the background. But instead of ending the affair, he did what he had done every other time the situation became uncomfortable. He avoided making a decision. 2 days later, Bianca sent him a message. "I'll see you at the dinner." Theophilus stared at the screen. He typed, "No," then deleted it. He typed again, "Please don't do this," deleted that too. Finally he wrote, "We need to talk first." Her reply came almost immediately. "We've been talking for months." He put the phone down. That evening, Kamari came into the room carrying a small box. "I got Grandma something." Theophilus looked up. "What is it?" "A bracelet. She'll like it." "I hope so." Kamari smiled. Then she noticed he wasn't really looking at her. "You okay?" "Yeah." She waited. He forced a smile. "I'm just tired." Kamari nodded. She put the gift into a drawer. The dinner was 3 days away. She was thinking about what dress to wear. She was thinking about whether Grandma would want cake. She was thinking about bringing an extra gift because Grandma always insisted she didn't need anything. She was not thinking about Bianca. She had no reason to. Across town, Bianca was choosing what she would wear. She wasn't preparing to attend a birthday dinner as a guest. She was preparing to enter a family that she believed Theophilus had already promised her. And Theophilus knew it. That was the part he could no longer pretend was harmless. The dinner wasn't going to be private. There would be family. There would be Kamari. There would be Grandma. And there would be Bianca. For the first time, all the separate pieces of Theophilus's life were heading toward the same table, and he had done nothing to stop them. By the time Grandma's birthday dinner arrived, Kamari had stopped asking Theophilus questions. Not because she had stopped noticing. She had simply become tired of asking questions that produced answers she didn't believe. She stood in front of the bedroom mirror that evening, adjusting one earring while Theophilus searched for his wallet. "You ready?" she asked. "Almost. You said that 10 minutes ago." He gave a nervous smile. Camry noticed. "You okay?" "Yeah. You look nervous." "I've got a lot on my mind." She looked at him through the mirror. "About the dinner? Just family stuff." Camry nodded. She didn't push. She picked up the small gift she had bought for Grandma and slipped it into her purse. "You know she's going to tell you she doesn't need anything." "I know. And then she'll ask who gave her the idea." Camry smiled. "That's why I bought it." For a second, Theophilus looked at her. There was something about her expression that made him uncomfortable. She wasn't suspicious. She wasn't angry. She was simply his wife, the woman who had spent nearly 8 years assuming he was standing beside her. He looked away. At the restaurant, the family had already begun settling in. Grandma was seated near the center of the table, laughing with one of her daughters. Camry walked over and hugged her. "Happy birthday." Grandma held her for an extra second. "Thank you, baby." Camry handed her the gift. Grandma looked at it. "You didn't have to do this." "I know." Grandma smiled. "Then why did you?" "Because I wanted to." Grandma nodded. "That answer I can accept." Theophilus stood a few feet away watching them. For a moment he almost felt normal. Then his phone vibrated. He checked the screen. "Bianca, I'm here." His stomach tightened. He looked toward the restaurant entrance. Bianca was standing there. She wasn't dressed like someone who had accidentally wandered into a family dinner. She looked prepared, confident. She spotted Theophilus. He didn't wave. She walked toward the table anyway. One of his relatives noticed her first. "Who is that?" Theophilus didn't answer. Bianca stopped beside the table. "Hi." A few people responded politely. Camry was turned away, talking to Grandma. Bianca looked around. She recognized several people from the stories Theophilus had told her. She knew which one was his mother. She knew which one was his brother. She knew Grandma. She knew more about these people than any stranger should have known. Then her eyes moved to the empty chair beside Camry's place. She pulled it out. Theophilus saw what she was doing. "Bianca," she looked at him. "What?" He shook his head. "Not here." Her expression hardened. "You said you weren't going to keep hiding me." "I didn't say that. You said your marriage was over." Several people at the table had gone quiet. Theophilus lowered his voice. "Please." Bianca looked around. Then she smiled faintly. "I thought you wanted me here." Camry turned. She saw the woman standing beside the table. She didn't recognize her. Her eyes moved to Theophilus. He looked like he had been caught doing something he couldn't explain. Camry said nothing. Bianca pulled out the chair. It was Camry's usual seat. Theophilus took one step forward. "Don't." Bianca looked directly at him. Then she sat down. Nobody moved. Camry remained standing beside Grandma. Grandma looked at Bianca. Then she looked at Theophilus. She didn't ask who the woman was. She already knew. Theophilus's mother lowered her eyes. His brother shifted in his chair. Bianca reached for the water glass in front of her. She seemed almost calm, as though she had finally arrived at a place she believed had been waiting for her. Grandma slowly put down her fork. The room became quiet, and Camry, still holding the gift bag in one hand, looked at her husband and saw something she had never seen on his face before. Fear. Grandma looked at Bianca for several seconds. Bianca held her gaze, still sitting in Camry's chair. Then Grandma said, "Get up." Bianca blinked. "I'm sorry?" "You heard me." The table had gone completely still. Theophilus looked down. "Grandma." She didn't look at him. "I'm talking to her." Bianca glanced around the table. Nobody came to her defense. She looked back at Grandma. "I thought this was a family dinner." "It is." Bianca's eyebrows lifted. "Then I don't understand the problem." Grandma leaned back. "That chair is not yours." Bianca swallowed. "I didn't mean anything by it." Grandma looked at the empty place sitting in front of her. "You walked in here knowing exactly what you were doing. Theophilus finally spoke. "Grandma, please." She turned toward him. "No." Theophilus stopped. Grandma's voice wasn't loud. That made it worse. "You don't get to ask me to make this easier for you." Camille was still standing nearby. She hadn't moved. Her eyes stayed on Theophilus. "Who is she?" Theophilus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Bianca looked at him. "You didn't tell her?" Camille looked at Bianca. "Tell me what?" Theophilus closed his eyes briefly. "Camille." She waited. He finally said, "Her name is Bianca." Camille nodded slowly. She had expected a name. What she hadn't expected was how familiar it sounded when he said it. Not like the name of a stranger, like the name of someone he'd said many times before. Camille's eyes moved back to Bianca. "How long have you known my husband?" Bianca hesitated. Theophilus stepped forward. "That's not—" "How long?" Bianca looked at him. Then she answered, "A while." Camille gave a small nod. "How long is a while?" Nobody spoke. Bianca looked uncomfortable now. "Almost a year." Camille looked at Theophilus. Almost a year. She thought about the late nights, the phone, the restaurant receipt, the strange affection, the questions she had asked, the answers he'd given. Everything suddenly had somewhere to go. She didn't cry. That seemed to unsettle Theophilus more than tears would have. "Camille, let me explain." She looked at him. "Not here." His shoulders dropped. Grandma finally looked at Bianca again. "You need to leave." Bianca stared at her. "I don't think that's fair." Grandma's expression didn't change. "Fair?" "Yes. You came into a family dinner, sat in another woman's seat, and expected everybody to accept you." Bianca looked at Theophilus. "He told me." Grandma raised one hand. "Don't!" Bianca stopped. Grandma turned to Theophilus. "Now we can talk about what you told her." Theophilus looked at the table. His mother spoke quietly. "What did you tell her?" He didn't answer. His brother leaned back. "Man," Theophilus looked up. "I made mistakes." Grandma shook her head. "Don't hide behind that word." He swallowed. "You had an affair, yes. You lied to your wife, yes. You lied to this woman too." Bianca looked sharply at him. "What?" Theophilus turned toward her. "Bianca, what did you lie about?" He didn't answer. Her face changed. "You told me she knew." Camille looked at him. Bianca continued. "You said you and Camille were basically finished." Theophilus lowered his voice. "I said things were complicated." "No," Bianca said. "You said she knew." Camille stared at her husband. That was the first time Bianca realized the two of them had not been living in the same story. She had believed she was waiting for a husband to leave his wife. Camille had believed she was trying to understand why her husband had become distant. And Theophilus had been moving between both women, giving each one just enough truth to keep the next lie alive. Grandma looked at Camille. "Baby, you don't have to stay here." Camille looked down at the gift she was still holding. Then she placed it gently beside Grandma's plate. "Happy birthday." Grandma's face softened. "Camille, I need to go." Theophilus stepped toward her. "Please." She looked at him. Not angry, not pleading, just tired. "Don't follow me." Then she walked away. Theophilus remained standing beside the table. For once, there was nobody left for him to blame, and Bianca was still sitting in the chair she had been so certain would become hers. Now she wasn't sure she wanted it anymore. Camille made it to the parking lot before she stopped. She stood beside her car with a gift bag still in her hand. For several seconds she simply stared at it. Grandma's birthday gift. She had spent time choosing it. She had wrapped it herself, and now she couldn't bring herself to take it back inside. Her phone vibrated. Theophilus. She watched his name appear on the screen, then disappear. A second call came. She turned the phone face down. Inside the restaurant, Theophilus was still standing beside the table. Bianca had finally gotten out of Camille's chair. She was holding her purse. "You told me she knew." Theophilus looked at her. "I know what I said." "No, you don't get to say that." Her voice was low, but everyone could hear it. "You told me she knew your marriage was over. I said we were having problems. You said she knew." His mother looked at him. "Did Camille know about Bianca?" Theophilus didn't answer. That silence was enough. His mother shook her head. You let that woman believe your wife was basically gone. I wasn't trying to. Then what were you trying to do? He stopped. He didn't have an answer that would make him look better. Bianca picked up her purse. You told me this family would eventually understand. Theophilus looked at her. I never said. You did. She laughed once, but there was no humor in it. You told me your grandmother would respect me once she understood how unhappy you were. Grandma stared at him. You used my name to make promises? Theophilus looked down. Bianca's face had changed. She had come into the restaurant believing she was forcing a decision. Now she was realizing she had been making decisions based on information Theophilus had carefully shaped for her. She looked toward the empty chair. You told me that was going to be my life. Grandma answered before Theophilus could. No, Bianca looked at her. That wasn't his life to give you. The words landed quietly. Bianca looked away. For the first time, she seemed less angry than embarrassed. She picked up her purse. I need to go. Grandma nodded. You do. Bianca left. Nobody stopped her. Theophilus remained where he was. His brother finally spoke. Man, what were you thinking? Theophilus rubbed his face. I don't know. Grandma looked at him. Yes, you do. He looked up. You wanted to feel wanted. Theophilus said nothing. You wanted somebody to look at you like you were still exciting. His eyes dropped. And instead of talking to your wife about what you were missing, you found somebody who didn't know you well enough to challenge you. Theophilus swallowed. Grandma's voice softened. That doesn't make you a monster. He looked at her. But it does make you responsible. His mother nodded slowly. We're not covering this up. Theophilus looked around the table. Nobody was attacking him. That somehow made it harder. He had expected anger. He had expected shouting. Instead, he was surrounded by people who loved him enough to refuse to excuse him. Grandma picked up the gift Camille had left behind. She held it against her chest. She still remembered my birthday. Theophilus looked away. That sentence hurt more than anything anyone had said to him. His phone vibrated again. Camille's name appeared. For one brief second, hope crossed his face. Then the message appeared. I need some space. Please don't come to the house tonight. He read it twice. His brother saw his expression. What did she say? Theophilus locked the phone. She needs space. Grandma nodded. Then give it to her. He looked at her. But, no. She placed the gift carefully on the table. You don't get to decide how quickly she heals from something you chose to do. Theophilus sat down. For the first time that evening, he noticed the empty chair. Camille's chair. The one Bianca had sat in. The one he had allowed another woman to believe belonged to her. And suddenly the chair didn't look like furniture anymore. It looked like everything he had taken for granted. Camille didn't sleep much that night. Not because Theophilus had ignored her request. He hadn't. His side of the bed remained empty, and for once, the silence didn't come with a late-night explanation or a phone call saying he was on his way home. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the dresser. Her wedding ring was still on her finger. She turned it once. Then again. She had spent 8 years believing that if something was wrong in their marriage, they would eventually talk about it. Now she wasn't sure which part hurt more, the affair itself, or how long he had been letting her believe she was safe. The next morning, Theophilus sent one message. I won't come by. I'm sorry. Take the time you need. Camille read it. She didn't answer. A few minutes later, another message appeared. I'm not asking you to forgive me. She put the phone down. That was the first thing he had said that didn't ask something from her. Later that afternoon, Grandma came by. Camille opened the door and immediately looked at her. You didn't have to come. I know. Grandma stepped inside. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Grandma held out the birthday gift Camille had left behind. You forgot this. Camille looked at it. I didn't forget it. Grandma nodded. I know. Camille took the box and held it against her chest. I was embarrassed. Grandma's expression softened. You have nothing to be embarrassed about. I sat there while another woman... Don't! Camille stopped. Grandma reached for her hand. What he did is his. Camille's eyes filled, but she looked away. I keep thinking about all the times I asked him if something was wrong. I know. And every time he looked me in the face and told me I was imagining things. Grandma didn't rush to answer. Finally she said, "You weren't imagining it." That was enough. Camry sat down. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. You don't have to know today. What if I never trust him again?" "Then you don't." Camry looked at her. Grandma continued, "Don't make a decision because you're afraid of disappointing people. Not me, not his parents, not anybody." Camry nodded. "What about him? What about him? He's going to want me to come back." Grandma gave a small sigh. "He may. I know him." "You do." "He'll say he'll change." Grandma looked directly at her. "Then let him." Camry frowned. "What?" "If he means it, he can change without you standing there watching." The words stayed with Camry. Meanwhile, Theophilus was sitting alone in the house they had built together. He walked into the kitchen and saw 2 coffee cups. One was his, the other was Camry's. He picked hers up, rinsed it, and put it away. Then he stood there. There was nothing left to distract him. His phone was quiet. Bianca wasn't calling. Camry wasn't calling. His family wasn't calling. For months he had managed to keep every uncomfortable feeling moving. Now there was nowhere to put it. That evening his mother called. "You need to come see me." Theophilus almost said he was busy. He stopped himself. "Okay." When he arrived, his mother didn't hug him. She pointed to a chair. "Sit." He sat. "I love you," she said. "I know, but I'm not going to tell Camry to come back." He looked down. "I didn't ask you to. Not yet." He swallowed. His mother leaned forward. "You need to understand something. We're going to support you as our son, but we're not going to protect you from what you did." Theophilus nodded. "I know. Do you?" He looked at her. "I think I'm starting to." She studied him. "Good." There was no dramatic speech, no easy forgiveness, just an uncomfortable truth. Theophilus had spent months trying to avoid losing anything. Now he was finally beginning to understand that some things had already been lost, and getting them back, if they could be gotten back at all, would require more than saying he was sorry. Theophilus expected the first few days to feel unbearable. They were. What he didn't expect was how ordinary the house would look. Camry's shoes were still by the door. Her books were still on the nightstand. Her mug was still in the cabinet. Nothing had been taken, and yet the house felt different. He almost called her several times. Each time he stopped. He remembered Grandma's words. "You don't get to decide how quickly she heals from something you chose to do." So instead of calling Camry, he started doing things he had avoided for years. He called his mother. He told her the truth without leaving out the parts that made him look bad. He called his brother. He admitted that Bianca had not simply been an accident. He had pursued the attention. He had lied. He had made promises. He had allowed another woman to believe she would eventually take his wife's place. His brother was quiet. Then he said, "You really messed this up." "I know. No, I don't think you do." Theophilus closed his eyes. "What do you want me to say?" "Nothing." His brother paused. "Just stop trying to make everybody feel better about what you did." That sentence stayed with him. For years, Theophilus had been good at solving problems. He could negotiate deals, handle difficult clients, smooth over disagreements. But this wasn't a business problem. There was no number he could change, no contract he could rewrite, no phone call that could make Camry forget what she had learned. A week later, he went to see Grandma. She opened the door and looked at him. "You eating?" "Not really." "That's not what I asked." He almost smiled. "Yeah, good. Come in." They sat at the kitchen table, the same place where Camry had once laughed about him losing his keys. Grandma poured him coffee. Theophilus stared at the cup. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do." Grandma didn't answer immediately. "You want me to tell you how to get your wife back?" He looked up. "Yes." "No." His face fell. "You need to learn how to become somebody she could trust again." He nodded slowly. "And if she never comes back?" Grandma looked at him. "Then you still need to become that person." He sat quietly. That was the first time the possibility of losing Camry permanently sounded real. Not as a threat, not as something she might say when angry, as a possibility he had created himself. Over the next several weeks, Theophilus began making changes that nobody saw. He stopped communicating with Bianca completely. He made sure there was no ambiguity about it. He became more honest with his family. He stopped asking people whether Camry had spoken about him, and when someone tried to give him an update, he asked them not to. He didn't want information about Camry through other people. If she wanted to talk to him, she would. That was harder than he expected. One evening his mother called. She asked about you. Theophilus went quiet. What did she say? His mother hesitated. She didn't say much. He sat down. Okay, you don't want to know? He thought about it. No. His mother sounded surprised. Why? Because if she wants me to know something, she can tell me. His mother was silent for a moment. Then she said, That's probably the first healthy thing you've said in a long time. He laughed softly. It wasn't funny, but somehow it helped. Months passed. Camry didn't return. Theophilus didn't demand that she do so. He began counseling on his own, not because anyone told him it would guarantee reconciliation, but because he finally understood that he needed to understand why he had been willing to risk everything for temporary attention. He had blamed routine. He had blamed feeling overlooked. He had blamed the distance between himself and Camry. Slowly he began admitting that those explanations had been excuses. He had wanted admiration. He had liked being wanted. And instead of dealing honestly with that need, he had betrayed someone who trusted him. That realization didn't make him feel better. It made him more honest. One afternoon, he saw Camry across a grocery store parking lot. She didn't see him. He stopped walking. For a second, he wanted to call her name. He didn't. He watched her put groceries into her car, close the trunk, and drive away. Then he stood there alone. It was a small moment. Nobody applauded him for letting her leave. Nobody even knew. But for the first time, Theophilus understood what accountability actually looked like. Sometimes it meant doing the right thing when doing the wrong thing would have been easier, and sometimes it meant letting someone you loved walk away because you had finally learned that love did not give you ownership of their decision. 3 months after the birthday dinner, Camry agreed to meet Theophilus for coffee. She almost canceled twice. Not because she wanted to punish him, she simply didn't know what she would feel when she saw him. When she arrived, Theophilus was already there. He stood when he saw her. Hi. Neither of them hugged. He pulled out the chair across from him. Camry sat. For a moment they talked about nothing important. Work, Grandma, a family member who had recently called Camry. Then Theophilus said, I know you don't owe me anything. She looked at him. I know. I just wanted to tell you something. What? I stopped asking people about you. Camry frowned slightly. What does that mean? When my mom tells me she spoke to you, I don't ask what you said about me. She looked down at her coffee. Why? Because I realized I was still trying to control the situation. He paused. I don't want to do that anymore. Camry didn't answer. Theophilus continued. I've been going to counseling. She looked up. How long? About 2 months. By yourself? Yes. She nodded. He didn't ask whether she was coming home. That surprised her. Instead, he asked, How have you been? Camry almost laughed. That's a strange question coming from you. I know. She looked away. I've been okay. He nodded. That's good. The conversation ended shortly afterward. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no promise, no kiss in the parking lot. Camry drove home wondering why the conversation had felt different. Not better, just different. A few weeks later, Theophilus was late to a meeting with Camry. It was only 15 minutes, but when he arrived, she was already standing outside the restaurant. I thought you weren't coming. I said I'd be here. You were late. I know. She looked at him. The old feeling came back immediately, that small tightening in her chest, that question she hated asking herself. Where were you? Theophilus saw it on her face. I left early, he said. Traffic was worse than I expected. She nodded. Then he added, and I know what you're thinking. She looked at him. You don't have to explain. I want to. He took out his phone. I was at my office. I got stuck on a call. You can see it if you want. Camry stared at him. He didn't push the phone toward her. He simply held it there. She shook her head. No. You sure? Yes. They went inside. Later, Camry admitted something to herself that she didn't want to admit yet. She had believed that if Theophilus ever changed, she would immediately feel safe around him. She didn't. His change didn't erase her memory. It only gave her something new to observe, and she needed time. Theophilus seemed to understand that now. He didn't become defensive when she needed reassurance. He didn't complain that she should be over it. He didn't say, "How long are you going to punish me?" He answered questions. Sometimes the questions were the same ones she had asked months earlier. He answered them anyway. One evening, Camry called him. "Are you busy?" "No." She hesitated. "I had a strange day." "What happened?" She told him. It wasn't important. A difficult meeting. A co-worker misunderstanding something. A small problem that would normally have been the kind of thing she told her husband without thinking. When she finished, there was a quiet pause. Then Theophilus said, "I'm sorry." Camry smiled faintly. "It's not a big deal." "I know." Another pause. "I just wanted to tell somebody." "I'm glad you called." She closed her eyes. That sentence stayed with her, not because it promised anything, because he hadn't tried to turn the conversation into a discussion about their marriage. He had simply listened. That night, Camry looked at her wedding ring. She still wasn't ready to put everything back the way it had been, but she was beginning to understand something. Trust wasn't going to return because Theophilus apologized enough times. It would return, if it returned at all, through hundreds of ordinary moments like this one. Moments nobody else would notice, and she wasn't ready to promise him a future. But for the first time since the birthday dinner, she was willing to consider that there might still be one. Camry didn't tell Theophilus she was thinking about coming home. She wasn't even sure she was. For several months, she had kept her distance while watching what he did with the space she had given him. He hadn't pressured her. He hadn't sent flowers every week. He hadn't appeared at her workplace. He hadn't asked Grandma to talk her into forgiveness. That mattered. One Saturday afternoon, Camry was sitting with Grandma when the older woman asked, "You still love him?" Camry looked down at her coffee. "Yes." Grandma nodded. "That's not the same as trusting him." "I know." "Good." Camry smiled faintly. "You always make things sound simple. They're not simple." Grandma reached across the table. "They're just honest." Camry was quiet. Then she said, "I don't want to go back to the way things were." "You shouldn't." That answer surprised her. Grandma continued, "If you go back, it can't be because you're trying to recover the old marriage." Camry looked at her. "What if I don't know what the new one would look like?" "Neither does he." For the first time, Camry smiled. That evening, she called Theophilus. He answered on the second ring. "Hey." "Hi." He went quiet. She could hear the change in his breathing. "I wanted to ask you something." "Okay. Would you come over tomorrow?" There was a pause. "Are you sure?" "No." He laughed softly. "Okay. I mean, I'm not sure what this means. I understand. I don't want you thinking we're fixing everything. I won't. And I don't want you making promises. I won't." Camry closed her eyes. "Then come tomorrow." The next afternoon, Theophilus arrived at the house. He stood outside the door for a moment before knocking. Camry opened it. Neither of them moved. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." He walked inside. Nothing looked different. That almost made it harder. The same couch, the same pictures, the same dining table. But both of them knew they weren't the same people who had lived there before. They sat across from each other. Camry folded her hands. "I've thought about what happened a lot." Theophilus nodded. "I know. No, you don't." He stopped. She looked at him. "I've thought about the affair, but I've also thought about everything that came before it." He waited. "I kept asking myself what I missed." "You didn't miss anything." She frowned. "You don't get to decide that." He nodded. "You're right." Camry looked down. "I keep wondering whether I should have noticed sooner." Theophilus answered immediately. "No." She looked up. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Take responsibility for something I did." He swallowed. You didn't cause this. Camry studied him. That was different from the conversations they used to have. Before, he would have found a way to explain why the marriage had become difficult. Now he wasn't looking for an explanation. He was accepting the decision he had made. Camry leaned back. I can't promise you I'll never think about Bianca again. I know. I can't promise I won't have bad days. I know. And if we're ever together again, there will be times when I don't believe you even when you're telling the truth. He nodded. I'll understand. She looked at him for a long moment. That scares me. What? That I might forgive you and still be hurt. Theophilus's eyes lowered. Don't expect forgiveness to erase it. Camry looked toward the window. For months she had thought forgiveness meant becoming the woman she had been before the betrayal. Now she was beginning to understand that it didn't. She could forgive him and still remember. She could love him and still have boundaries. She could consider rebuilding the marriage without pretending the old one hadn't broken. Finally she looked back at him. I want to try. Theophilus didn't move. I mean try. He nodded slowly. Okay. Camry held up a hand. Don't make it bigger than that. I won't. She almost smiled. Good. There was no embrace, no dramatic promise, no celebration. Just two people sitting across from each other, finally admitting that if they were going to rebuild anything, they would have to build it differently. And this time, Camry would not be carrying the whole thing by herself. The first few weeks after Camry agreed to try again were harder than either of them expected. They had imagined that deciding to rebuild would make things feel lighter. It didn't. Some days were easy, others weren't. The first time Theophilus came home 20 minutes later than he said he would, Camry noticed the clock before she noticed anything else. He walked through the door. Hey. She looked up from the couch. Hey. He set down his keys. Traffic was terrible. Camry nodded. He could see the question forming before she asked it. Where were you? At the office. I left around 6. She looked at him, then at the clock. He didn't become defensive. I can show you. She shook her head. No. He waited. I believe you, she said, but the words didn't sound as confident as she wanted them to. Theophilus nodded. Okay. He didn't ask her to reassure him. He understood that trust was still fragile. Another evening, Camry found herself standing in the kitchen while Theophilus was making coffee. She watched him for a moment. You know what's strange? What? I used to never think about where you were. He stopped stirring. I know. Now sometimes I do. I know. She looked at him. How do you keep saying that? Because I understand why. She leaned against the counter. What if it takes years? He put the spoon down. Then it takes years. Camry looked away. She had expected him to say something comforting. Instead, he gave her an answer she could actually believe. Months continued to pass. Theophilus kept going to counseling. He became more open about his schedule without turning it into a performance. He stopped treating transparency as something Camry owed him gratitude for. It simply became part of how he lived. He also stopped talking about Bianca, not because the subject was forbidden, but because Bianca was no longer part of his life. There was nothing to hide. One afternoon, Camry asked him something she had never asked before. Did you really think you were unhappy? Theophilus was quiet. Yes. She nodded. Do you still think that? No. Why? He looked at her. Because I finally understand that I was unhappy with myself. Camry didn't respond immediately. Then she said, That's the first honest answer you've given me about that. He accepted that without trying to defend himself. Later that month, they visited Grandma together. The older woman opened the door and looked at them standing there. Well, she said, look at this. Camry smiled. Hi, Grandma. Grandma hugged her first. Then she looked at Theophilus. You behaving? He nodded. I'm trying. Grandma gave him a look. Trying is a good start. They talked about ordinary things. Food, family, work. Nobody treated the evening like a celebration. Nobody asked Camry whether she had forgiven him. That mattered. Before they left, Grandma pulled Camry aside. You sure? Camry nodded. I think so. That's enough. Camille looked toward Theophilus. He's different. Grandma followed her eyes. Different is good, but I still remember. You're supposed to. Camille looked at her. Grandma squeezed her hand. Forgiveness isn't pretending it didn't happen. Camille nodded. And if you ever decide this isn't what you want anymore, I'll leave. Grandma smiled. Good. There was no shame in the answer. That was what Camille needed to hear. She wasn't staying because she was afraid of starting over. She wasn't staying because the family wanted peace. She wasn't staying because Theophilus had finally become sorry enough. She was staying because, after everything, she had decided she wanted to see what they could become. A few months later, Camille and Theophilus sat at their dining table eating dinner. Nothing dramatic happened. They talked about work. They laughed about something on television. Theophilus reached for the salt. Camille passed it to him without thinking. He smiled. Thanks. She nodded. It was such a small thing that neither of them mentioned it. But Camille noticed afterward that she had spent the entire evening without checking the time, without wondering where he had been, without listening for the sound of his phone. Trust hadn't returned all at once. It had returned quietly, in pieces. And for the first time, Camille understood that forgiving Theophilus wasn't about giving him back the marriage he had broken. It was about deciding, on her own terms, whether the two of them could build something better than what they had before. Nearly a year after Grandma's birthday dinner, Camille stood in the dining room putting flowers into a vase. The table wasn't set for a celebration. There were only 4 plates. Grandma was coming for dinner. Theophilus walked in carrying a grocery bag. You got everything? Almost. He looked at the flowers. Those are nice. Camille's flowers are always nice. She glanced at him. You don't have to say that. I know. She smiled. It was a small exchange, but it would have been impossible for them a year earlier. Back then, they had been living beside each other without realizing how much distance had grown between them. Now they were learning how to notice one another again. When Grandma arrived, Camille hugged her at the door. You look good, baby. So do you. Grandma looked past her. Theophilus. Hey, Grandma. You cooking? Yes. Then I'm nervous. Camille laughed. Theophilus shook his head. That's disrespectful. I'm old. I can say what I want. They sat around the dining table. For a while, the conversation stayed ordinary. Work, family, a cousin's new job, someone's upcoming birthday. Then Grandma looked at the 4 chairs. Her eyes paused briefly on Camille's. Theophilus noticed. So did Camille. Neither said anything. They didn't need to. That chair had become a family memory. Not because of Bianca. Because of what happened after Bianca sat in it. Grandma finally spoke. You know what I remember about that night? Camille smiled faintly. What? Nobody knew what to say. Theophilus looked down. Grandma continued. And I remember thinking how strange it was that somebody could walk into a room and think a chair meant she had earned a place. Camille looked at her. Grandma wasn't looking at Bianca. She wasn't even really looking at the past. She was looking at Theophilus. He nodded. I understand now. Grandma raised an eyebrow. Do you? I think I do. He looked at Camille. I thought because I had built a life with her, I couldn't lose it. Camille remained quiet. I thought she would always be there. Grandma nodded. That was your mistake. Theophilus looked at his wife. I treated something valuable like something permanent. Camille's eyes lowered. She didn't need him to apologize again. She had heard enough apologies. What mattered now was what he had done afterward. He had stopped asking other people to convince her. He had accepted her boundaries. He had changed habits that nobody else could see. He had learned to tell the truth before the truth became a crisis. And Camille had changed too. She no longer stayed quiet simply because confrontation made her uncomfortable. If something bothered her, she said so. If she needed space, she asked for it. If she disagreed, she didn't automatically soften the disagreement to protect somebody else's feelings. Their marriage had not gone back to what it was. It couldn't. Too much had happened. But that didn't mean it couldn't become something honest. After dinner, Grandma helped Camille clear the table. Theophilus started washing dishes. Grandma watched him for a moment. "You know," she said, "I never wanted to embarrass that woman." Theophilus looked over. "I know. I wanted her to understand something." "What?" "That a place in a family isn't created by sitting in somebody else's chair." He nodded. Grandma dried a plate. "And neither is a marriage." Theophilus looked at Camarie. She heard them. She smiled faintly. Later that night, after Grandma left, Camarie and Theophilus sat together in the living room. He reached for her hand. She let him. Neither said anything for a while. Then Camarie looked at him. "You know I still remember that night." "I know. I probably always will." He nodded. "I know." She squeezed his hand. "But I don't think about it every day anymore." Theophilus looked at her. That was enough. He didn't ask what it meant. He didn't ask whether she was completely healed. He didn't ask whether she trusted him forever. He simply held her hand, because he had finally learned that love wasn't proven by getting what he wanted. Sometimes it was proven by accepting what the other person was free to choose. Camarie had chosen to forgive him. She had chosen to try again. And she had chosen to remain only because she wanted to, not because anyone had convinced her she had to. The chair where Bianca once sat was still just a chair, but everyone in that family remembered what it had represented. A man who thought he could divide his life into separate pieces. A woman who believed she was entitled to a place she hadn't earned. A grandmother who refused to pretend disrespect was acceptable. And a wife who finally understood that walking away from disrespect didn't necessarily mean walking away from love. Sometimes it was the only thing that made rebuilding possible. And that was what Camarie carried with her long after the birthday dinner was forgotten. She hadn't stayed because she was afraid to leave. She stayed because, after everything, staying had finally become her choice. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Camarie made the right decision by giving Theophilus another chance, or should she have walked away for good? And if you were in Camarie's position, could you ever trust someone again after a betrayal like this? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. There's no right answer. Sometimes people choose to leave, and sometimes they choose to rebuild. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to Mr. Graham Stories, and share this story with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for spending these moments with us. Remember, forgiveness is a choice, but so is protecting your peace. Until the next story, take care of yourself and the people you love.
Thank you for watching Mr. Graham Stories, my beautiful, amazing family.